Hello, I'm sarahfops, and I don't really like AI. As you might see by the title of my talk, it's called The Human in the Loop, AI-Induced Skill Atrophy. And I want to talk about why being forced into this position of being said human in the loop is not good for your learning or the development of your skills. Before I get into that, a bit of base work, a bit of the premise behind all of this. The premise is, obviously LLMs are great. Chatbots, they're useful, but it's way too many manual steps. You have to type your first prompt, get an answer, see if that works, repeat, rinse and repeat. So the future is agentic. So with a chatbot, you very much directly interact with an LLM, a large language model. You type in a text, said text gets translated into tokens, roughly 0.75 words in English, and an answer is generated based on the training data. So for each token, you basically have the question, what is the next most likely proceeding token? And this is the answer you get. With Agentic AI, there is a step in between there. What you do is give a context to an agent, a context and a task. Said agent does the prompting or just generally the interaction with the LLM for you, and can even do so in multiple iterations. And in the end, what you get back is a hopefully solved task, which you have to adjudicate the quality of and have to see if that looks good to you or if there is changes to be made. That might have some unforeseen consequences. You're not really doing things manually anymore, which is great if your one and only objective is saving time. However, you don't build new skills doing that, especially like software programming skills. If you have to provide context, there's still the domain, you have knowledge of that, but the actual implementation, you don't do anymore. So those skills, you don't build anew. And what you had over time will also start to deteriorate. For everyone who has ever visited a course or training about learning and all of that, I'm very sorry for the next 3 slides. You will probably have seen them before, but they're all quite relevant here. The first one is the forgetfulness, or the forgetting curve, the forgetfulness curve, which basically tells us knowledge does not stay in our brain forever. This is especially important with new knowledge before it has been truly committed to long-term memory, but does also apply to knowledge you have had for longer. As you can see, the forgetting curve, way less severe, but still continues after this initial learning period. The important thing here is we need repetition. We need to do things over and over again to truly commit them to memory, especially for skills that we have newly learned. So, what do we do to keep those skills? I have asked this question at conferences, for example. I got a few answers to that. The first one is basically, what is the issue? We're still involved. We still adjudicate what the AI puts out as said human in the loop. The other answer was do more trainings, do more certifications so you understand how things work and can apply all of that even if you don't do it yourself, but an agent does it for you. Let's continue with the next slide that some of you probably have seen before, which is the so-called VARK model, which basically gives a very brief explanation on the different ways that humans learn. For some humans, one of the methods is better, one might not work at all. So the important thing is you need different things to provide a good learning experience to everyone. So there's visual, that is images, charts, graphs, visualization with my stickers, for example. Then we have auditory. This is what I'm literally doing right now, giving a talk. It is also discussion, and can also be a thing like reading a text aloud. So if you have difficulty with committing written text to memory or learning something from it, maybe try reading it out aloud. That might actually help you. Then we have reading and writing. That is instructions, that's articles, but the important part here is also writing. Some of you probably had an exam where you were allowed to bring a cheat sheet into said exam. And you might have also seen that I don't really need the cheat sheet. I committed the things I wrote down there to memory. Writing, important part here, so note-taking and also summarizing, like for example, an educational text for yourself. And then we also have kinesthetic. That is literally your hands-on experience, be it in a craft, manufacturing something, or in the case of software engineering, writing code. On the topic of more trainings, more certifications, the next slide some of you probably have seen before, the different ways of learning and their impact. The most important part is experiential learning, so actually doing things yourself, solving problems, learning from your own mistakes. Social learning, so seeking community, talking about what you have learned, seeking discussion, is also still an important factor, although significantly less than the experiential learning already. And formal learning, so the thing you do when you book a training, when you decide to do a certification and have that test that in the end tells you, you know this, is only 10% of what you need to properly learn. The issue now is the role of the human in the loop does very much not align with all of this. Because it's a single way the output is done, you're reading it, and if your goal is to be super quick, you probably won't do much note-taking, summarizing, or for example, visualizing. What did the AI do here? Is that correct? Is it not? I got another answer to the question also, which is, it doesn't matter. Why would we care? It's okay to lose these skills. The AI can do it for us anyway. And implicitly, the answer that the companies providing the LLMs give us also aligns with this. Now the obvious question is, why is that the case? This is a quote from OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. And what it basically says is, we want to rent out brain. So if we don't have relevant skills ourselves anymore, that makes the situation for them much easier. Way easier to rent out brain power when you're dependent on it. So, with all of this in mind, what to do? This is what I would really like to tell you, because it is my personal opinion. I don't really like AI, but I have not been living under a rock for the last few years. The technology is unfortunately integrated in our daily lives and also in our workplaces. So the question is more, what do I do if I either have to use AI systems, for example, because my workplace requires it, because my manager really likes the word AI, and likes short-term productivity increases. Let's ignore the long-term ramifications. Or if you want to interact with the technology to learn more about it or to use it for yourself. I have 4 points for this. One is understand what it is. The second one is to have rules of engagement. 3 and 4 are kind of combined because it's important for you to be aware of the ramifications and also for you to spread awareness of said ramifications. It's kind of the split in between I want to use it and I have to use it. 2 different approaches here. So, for understanding what it is, I already gave the brief introduction on the second slide that an LLM takes an input, translates it into tokens, and then generates a answer based on its training data, where it checks what is, given the data I have, the most likely proceeding token. To summarize this in another way, AI is professionalized guessing. This is just a quote from a conference I really liked, and it summarizes it for me rather nicely. Next up is rules of engagement. And the thing is, this discussion isn't new. AI isn't the first time this discussion was relevant. Pilots. Many planes have an autopilot. And if you read discussions in aviation forums, they're surprisingly similar to the discussions we have right now about the usage and the ramifications of AI. We can, however, take a few important points away from that. A pilot needs to know how to fly without autopilot. So you need a good base of knowledge to even get started. The first thing you do when you start your pilot license is not to immediately go into autopilot and do nothing else. You learn how to you also learn a lot of theory, but you actually learn how to fly a plane. Then the next important thing is practical training. It's not only, here, have this autopilot, go have fun with it. You need practical training to be properly able to use an autopilot. So to translate this into our discussion, you need to be able to write good and concise prompts. So your outputs are actually what you wanted, and you don't have to repeat everything 20 times, also burning unnecessary resources in the meanwhile. And the other important thing is, you need to keep your skills sharp. Even if pilots use an autopilot during everyday flight. If there's turbulences or if there's a difficult approach, you still need to be able to fly that plane manually and to land it manually. Even after the initial skill acquisition, you need to be able to keep those skills. I have to be honest here. If you're used to solving your problems with an AIs, be it a completely agentic system or be it prompting an LLM, you will take longer to solve problems yourself. But that is okay, because you're not only solving a problem, you're also learning and refining your skills in the meanwhile. If you want to have AI involved in that, there are a few approaches. Think of your solution first. Think about, okay, I have this problem, what would I do? Then give that solution to the AI, be it an agent, be it an LLM. I'm using them kind of interchangeably here, to be honest, because it works with both. And let it fill the gap. You obviously have to validate whether the gaps it filled makes sense. But there might be some ideas in there that you yourself didn't have. It's basically a best of both worlds approach. You still get a digital sparring partner, but you're also keeping your skills sharp and thinking about problems yourself. In that vein, you can also prompt an AI to ask you questions instead of you asking it questions and having them answered. Among these questions, there might be an approach you haven't even thought of. Next up, and lastly, why and explain are great words. They are our friends. To prompt again and again, ask why. And then from there on, do your own research. Quite a few AI agents or chatbots also list sources, use those, see what those sources are, see if they're actually reputable sources, or if you should maybe not trust what you just got a response there that much. One more thing there. Solving problems yourself, understanding things, finally solving that super difficult tasks just feels good. Please don't deprive your brain of that. You will have way more fun in what you do if you have these moments of joy of having solved a difficult problem yourself. Now, before that might have sounded a little bit positive, so let's get to the next point. Be aware of the ramifications and spread awareness about ramifications. So, I'm not going to go into all of the problems that AI brings with it into detail. This is just one very good example about the biases baked into our modern technologies by biases prevalent in the training data. Stable Diffusion, for those who don't know, is a image generation tools, and the images it generates are biased. There's also the environmental impact. I already mentioned burning a lot of resources. Models need to be trained. Every prompt costs electricity, also costs water for power plants and the cooling of data centers. And there's also the problem with hardware. I think anyone who has tried to buy RAM or an SSD or basically anything in the last few months has seen that. And then there's also the societal impact, destroying people's livelihood. Also, putting a damper on human creativity, because what the AI does is recycle. It also is a transfer of resources, because we can talk about skills as resources here, from many. Because while programming isn't trivial, quite a few people can do it. Also applies to other sectors, of course. To a few, mostly American, and some of them even fascist billionaires. So the question is, do we really want that? Now, for companies, the story is a little bit different. They don't always care about societal problems. They don't care about environmental problems. So the important thing here is to hit them where it hurts, which is the wallet. These are just a few examples of how AI products have either gotten more expensive or worse, or the dependence on them has really backfired for a company with their access to Claude Code being revoked because of undetermined service violation and their way to appeal being a Google form. And with skills further and further deteriorating and venture capital funding slowly running out, this problem is only gonna get worse. The question here is, do you want to be dependent on these technologies when the prices inevitably rise? Then there is also the other question that especially European companies should very much ask them. Most of the big AI players are US companies. Is that smart in the current situation? So I hope there was something useful in there for you, maybe something that made you think, maybe some ideas that you can mention should you have to have that talk yourself. That would be my part. I was told earlier, despite the 20 minutes being almost over, we have a bit of time for questions. So first off, thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Was Fragen?
By the way, if English is the problem, you can ask your question in German. I'll try and translate it as verbatim as possible, and then give an answer.
If there are no questions, that's also fine.
It is.
Then, thanks a lot for your talk.